and welcome back. So jumping inside of Photoshop, I'll begin creating the game's main menu. This is one of the first things the player will see, so the goal here is to make it visually pleasing and clear. The main menu is also a great place to create various buttons, which will give the player more info about the developers, links to the creator's website or social media pages, and perhaps even explain the rules. So I'll create my main menu design on a simple 7 inches wide and 5 inches long canvas. And while sketching out ideas, I'm thinking of what I should show in the menu and what I shouldn't. Some games go for very simplistic menus, with perhaps only the game's title and some buttons. Others use the main menu to showcase some of the key characters in the game and get the player excited. At first I thought I would draw the player character surrounded by the game's various monsters, but after some thought I figured it would be nice to just keep the menu simple by only featuring the game's hero. This way the monsters will come more as a surprise. The menu will also be more relaxing, a little break from monsters and shooting. Once the sketch complete, I took some time to paint the character in the style I've been using for the entire project. And then I wrote down the name of the game, so The Flames, as well as 2 buttons. One which will link to an about page with more info about the developers, which I wrote down on another Photoshop file, and the other which, once pressed, will take the players to the actual game scene. Since the rules are incredibly simple, I drew them on another file, and I'll add them to the main menu. With that done, I can export all these sprites into my Unity project. There I'll create a brand new scene called Main Menu, and opening it up, I'll create a new UI canvas and change the scale mode to scale with screen size, as well as type the dimensions shown here. This way the main menu will look good on multiple screen resolutions. Now I can create a new UI image which I'll call title and drag and drop inside of that sprite slot the name of the game. Holding down Alt and Shift, I'll snap that to the top of the screen and then move it down manually a bit. I think that looks cool. I'll then create another UI image called character, for example, and I'll drag and drop our hero right there. I'll then snap that UI element to the left side of the screen and move it a bit to the right. Awesome. And then I'll do the same for the menu's 2 buttons and rules. Remember that UI elements further down the hierarchy will render in front of elements higher up. So for example, I think I'll add the game's background image we created earlier on in the course to the menu. So I'll make sure that the UI image with the background is right at the top of the hierarchy. This way it's behind everything else. Awesome. The menu is looking pretty cool, but it's far from complete. How about adding a slight drop shadow to all these UI pieces? To do so, just grab one of your images and add a shadow component to it. You can now tweak the shadow's direction, its color, and opacity. Great. We now need to make all these buttons actually work and react to the player. When I say react, I mean have the buttons play a little animation or change color when the player hovers his mouse cursor over them. The goal being to A, make the menu feel cooler and more interesting, and B, to clearly communicate to the player that these buttons can be interacted with. There's nothing worse than having a bunch of buttons that you know can be clicked on, but don't do anything to communicate that fact. It makes the game feel a bit buggy and unpolished. So I'll select the play button, for example, and actually add to it a button component. The button component will not only allow us to create animations or change the image's color whenever our cursor hovers over it or clicks it, but will also enable us to call a function from a script to, for example, change scene. So it's a really useful component. Alright, so say I wanted the play button to turn a slightly darker orange/red whenever my cursor hovers over it. I could do so by making sure that the transition is set to color tint, and then I can change these various color values. One for the normal color, in other words, what will be the color of the play button when the cursor isn't hovering over it. Leave this at white to keep the default color. Then there's a highlighted color option. I'll set this to some orange color. This way the play button will turn a darker orange when the cursor hovers over it, as you can see right here. And then you can also set the color for the play button when the player clicks on it. Also change the navigation mode to none, or you'll get some quirky behaviors whenever you click on a button. So as you saw, it's really easy. If you want, you can get the button playing an animation instead. To do so, change the transition mode to animation and then hit auto generate animation. You'll now need to choose a location in your project to save your animations, and now heading over to the animation window, you can create an animation for when the button is in its normal state so when the cursor is not hovering over it, an animation for when the cursor is hovering over the button, another for when the button has been clicked on, and lastly, one for when the button is disabled. In other words, when the interactable box is unchecked. Something I rarely do. So for example, I'll get the button slightly scaling up when the cursor hovers over it. Don't forget, of course, like with animating characters, to hit the red record button before animating. And perhaps for the pressed animation, I'll scale down the button a bit. And hitting play, you'll see the results. However, the buttons do feel a bit floppy. They don't react very fast to what the player's doing. To change this, simply select your button and head over to the animator window. There you can change the transition duration between the various animations, just like for a game character. So for example, I'll select the transition going from the button's normal animation to its highlighted animation, and change the transition duration to 0.1 seconds instead of 0.25. This way the transition will be faster and feel more responsive. Same thing for the transition going from highlighted to normal, or from normal to pressed. And as you can see, that feels a whole lot better. And lastly, you can change the transition mode to sprite swap. This will let you change your button's appearance depending on whether it is currently normal, highlighted, pressed, or disabled. So for example, here I have my normal play button, and the same button except with an orange glow. That would look great if my cursor was hovering over it. So I can drag and drop that glowing play button inside of the highlighted empty slot in the inspector, hit play, and you'll see the results. So as you can see, there's plenty cool stuff you can do with the button component. So have fun and really bring those buttons to life. Alright, how about we now add a cool custom cursor to the scene instead of the boring little white arrow. So I'll simply create a new UI image and drag and drop a cursor design inside of that. And now I can simply add the cursor follow script we created in the previous section. However, as you can see, my play button no longer seems to react to the cursor. This is because the real cursor is only detecting the quote-unquote false cursor we just created. We can fix that by making sure the cursor is higher up in the hierarchy than the interactable buttons. But that looks a bit odd and ugly. Instead, we can create a new canvas. Again, set the scale mode to scale with screen size, and type in the right dimensions here, and then add another component to that canvas called canvas group. And here, all we need to do is uncheck interactable and blocks raycasts. Now I'll drag and drop the cursor inside of that new canvas. It will no longer stop the buttons from detecting where the real cursor is and what it's doing. Also make sure to tweak the sort order up here. So I'll give the canvas we just created a sort order of 1. This way all elements inside of this canvas will render in front of all the elements inside of the other canvas, which has a sort order of 0. Awesome. Lastly, I'll create a new scene called About, and add to it a canvas with my background image and some text about me and my bro, the developers. Okay, with that all done, you can jump inside of the next tutorial where Liam will bring you through the process of creating smooth scene transitions whenever you click on a button or something happens in-game. So for example, when the player hits the play button, we want him to be brought to the game scene, and when he dies in-game, it would be cool if he was sent to a game over scene, and from there he can transition back to the main menu. As you'll see, it's really easy stuff, so have a good time, and I'll see you soon to create some final art for the game. Cheers!